What is going on, dudes and lady dudes? Welcome back to Just Nuts, guys. Today, I'm doing a little discussion video talking about what I believe to be the 5 most impactful cards from Link Vrains Pack 3. And by impactful, I'm talking about the metagame, the competitive scene, which 5 cards out of the 20 that are the newly revealed Link monsters will have the most impact, will see the most play, and will just have just any kind of movement caused by them in the metagame. So, before we get into it, I want to bring up some honorable mentions here. First, I want to mention Mecha Phantom Beast Auroradon. This is definitely a pretty powerful card, and I think we may see this card, but there were some cards I definitely just felt stronger about here, and that's just one thing you got to keep in mind. This is a top 5, so even if there are some ones I do think we will see in the meta at some point, it doesn't mean it'll be right away. But I do think this card is really, really interesting here and has some really strong points. And as well as Samorg, King of Birds. I am definitely partial to this one. This is one of my favorite cards in this whole set. But the problem is, it really only supports like 4 decks. I mean, really, what Winged Beast archetypes can really make use of this card outside of, I don't know, Raid Raptors, Black Wings, some Orgs, obviously, and Harpies. Like, what other decks can even use this? And because of that, I just don't think this card will ever really be seen much more than Rogue, but I still think it really is powerful, and I just think it was just outside the top 5. Now, we move into the actual top 5 cards here. Let's go right into it with number 5, Sky Striker Ace Sieg. So, one of the main reasons I'm bringing this card here and why it's so low is because I don't think this card actually makes strikers like so much better, but I do think it'll see play. And that's the thing, is that like we've seen strikers, they've been around for over a year and a half now in our metagame, arguably tier 1 the entire time for a year and a half straight. And even if not, it's just being played, the engine is being played in other decks. So you could still see this card being played possibly in those decks as well. So just because of that, just because we're like, maybe the ban list, but like now that we know that this card's coming and we have 2 new cards coming in Ignition Assault, I don't really expect them to completely destroy strikers yet. I mean, why would you? Because then your products aren't, like, these products aren't going to be as desirable because people won't think strikers are good enough to really even make use of them. So I don't expect them to get hit that much on the ban list, and because of that, we just know this will get seen. I just don't think it's like the most insane card in making strikers better. I just know we'll see it and it will get some play. That's why it's lower on the list. Next up, we have Celine, the Sacred Empress of Endymion. This is another pretty cool card, and it kind of holds the same point as Sky Striker Ace Sieg. I just think it's a little better in its deck for what it is. And like, we know Pendulums are probably a tier 1.5 deck at the moment in terms of how often it tops and stuff. We know it's powerful, but we also know it just doesn't really get topped for whatever reason. It just does not get as many tops as other decks do. So it's just right outside, but the Endymion cards are one of the best, if not the best, package/engine in all of Pendulum builds, and we've seen builds with people like topping with like very pure like spell counter centric versions of those decks, and this card is very, very good in those, and it's even pretty solid in those. Just opening up zones, I mean, really, if you can make this before your pen summon, it's going to make your pen summon pretty insane. You're going to fill all of your zones on pen summon most likely if you get this card out first, and it also just gets you spell counters when you otherwise might not be able to activate spells and stuff. This card, if you can just make her, she's just going to get you spells or spell counters to set up those, so that's really, really nice as well. And I just think it's pretty good. So there's that. So moving on to number 3, we've got World Keymaster Lib. So I actually really think this card has been underrated so far. I mean, really, we haven't seen too much about it. So like, you could argue like we haven't seen enough, like it hasn't even been out long enough for people to even like underrate it. But from some of the reactions I've seen of this card, people were like, yeah, it's nice, but it's nothing crazy. I actually think it's like kind of crazy, and call me crazy for believing that, but I think it's just so strong. I mean, you know, think about, like, you can't summon this card unless you have a World Legacy card in your graveyard. Okay, well, World Legacy cards are out there. World Legacy Succession, that's a generic Monster Reborn card that a lot of different decks can play. Guard Dragon builds can play it. I mean, you think about Mech Knights. I mean, Shannon Long has been on a tear with Mech Knights, and they play 3 World Legacy Memory and World Legacy Succession and some other World Legacy cards. And then you look at any deck that just works through IB, the World Chalice Justiciar, that card searches you a World Legacy card. And so, like, you just set up so much with this card. Like, you make her, you get to set any World Legacy card straight from the deck. So that could be your World Legacy Secrets and Mechanites. It could be World Legacy Sorrow, the counter trap that I believe it just works like as long as you control a co-linked monster. It's just an Omni Negate, which is actually really good. There's that other trap that just says like generically send any link monster from the field to the graveyard. That's non-targeting, non-destruction. There's just a ton of utility. That's my point. And disruption. So going first, it gives more versatile options to a deck like Mechanites. Like that, which is really good. And then, of course, her other effect. Her other effect is also very, very strong. If she's used as link material for anything, you can immediately shuffle one card on the field back into the deck. That is non-targeting, non-destruction as well, giving a very, very strong removal effect to any deck that can get this card out. She is not specific to material. She takes any two monsters. The only prerequisite to summoning her is just getting the World Legacy card engraved. And because of all those points, I think she's really abusable in a couple of different decks. She could be possibly the difference to make Mechanites better. She could possibly be the difference to make World Chalice a relevant thing again. We'll have to see on that. Obviously, she'll have the most synergy in that deck. And then there are just other decks that just can either make IB or they make or they just play World Legacy cards already in their deck just because, and then it makes this card makeable. And so because of that, I think we'll definitely see this card played in some decks here and there, and I think it will see itself in our metagame at one point. Now for number 2, I've got Predaplant Verte Anaconda. This card's very, very strong. I almost wanted to put this card as number 1 because I really, really love this card. I love how it works. But I ended up putting it in number 2 because number 1 is just kind of crazy and it's so hype, and I can't even argue with the hype because what it can do is so strong. But as far as this card goes, it's just so good. I mean, you look at how many archetypes have just a fusion card, fusion or polymerization card that can be abused by this thing. It's so crazy. So many archetypes just have cards like Miracle Fusion that just fuse from the graveyard. They have their own version of that so that you don't even have to have the monsters on field or in hand to really do anything. You could have used them as link materials just to summon this card, and then there you go. You can just make the fusion monster for free. Now, the restriction's not even that bad in my opinion also because it just says for the rest of the turn. Like, it's one thing if it said like I don't know, you can only summon the fusion monster other than this card the turn it summon or something like that, or it could be much more restrictive to your play. But you can just do everything before going into this and then just finish your turn with this, ending stuff off. There's already shenanigans with like Red Eyes Fusion because that card's insane. The fusion monster that card summons is just nuts, and all you have to do is just play like 1 Garnet in the deck, or maybe it's 2. Yeah, actually I think it's 2 Garnets in the deck to make that just possible. And you know, we've seen stuff like that. We've seen people play like Gem Knight Fusion, just because. Or was that the? I can't even. I'm brain farting. The one that gives you the summons the Gem Knight that gives you the additional summon. Is that Gem Knight Fusion, or is there a different name for it? Brilliant Fusion? There you go, Brilliant Fusion. That's where the term Garnet came from. Like, even though that card's awful to draw, you still, the card that you played that made it worth it was just so worth it. The ceiling was so high that it was worth playing the low ceiling of drawing your Garnet. And so I think we could easily see that here. On top of that, there's also stuff like so many players are playing Super Poly, and this card just allows you to, as long as you can put 2 effect monsters on the field, Super Poly your opponent. Now, it won't be a quick effect, and it will be negatable if your opponent has a negate possible, but still, I mean, I still feel like that's like so strong. So strong to just like take 2 of your opponent's monsters to get yourself your own boss monster on field. So for all those reasons, for how generic it is, all you would need to play is like 1 Super Poly, and then you could just play this in the extra. Like, so many decks could play it, and I'm probably going to do that in a ton of decks, probably a ton of deck profiles. So just be ready for that when this card comes out. I'm really excited for this card. Really, really, really excited. And I think it earns its spot as number 2. Now for the final one, you probably already know what it is based on what we've seen so far. It's Union Carrier. This card is absolutely insane. Now it's weird because when you first read it, you don't think to yourself, this card's insane. You really don't, because it just equips a monster from deck to a monster on the field. But this card can't be linked away the turn it's summoned, I believe. And yeah, so people would think like, what, you equip something to itself, but you can't even get it in the grave? Well, sort of. This card, particularly in Orcus at the moment, as far as like meta decks, is particularly potent because you can just do stuff where you like play. So the big thing is like the Destruction Sword card, but we'll get there in a minute. But for Orcus, you can just use this to just like turbo Orcus cards into the graveyard. As long as you can set up this and any dark monster on field, you can just send, or you can just equip a dark monster to it, another dark monster from deck to it, link it off. Link the other or monster you control off. Got him. So rattled right now. I don't know why. I'm stumbling. Link that off, and then you have like the cards engraved, because all Orcus want to do is just get all their Orcus cards engraved, because they're just going to plus you out the booty hole from grave and just extend you so far, right? So there's just like a ton of combos that Orcus can have used with this card. And then the other thing is just how generically busted this card is with Buster. Is it Buster? It's Dragon Buster, the of the Destruction Swordsman. So if you don't know what that card does, that card literally just says if it's equipped to a monster, your opponent cannot special summon from the extra deck. Just an insane floodgate. You think of summon limit, you can only summon twice. Everyone just can't even use the extra deck. That's probably game against half the meta decks out there. And also, it's a light. And even with this card's restriction saying you can only equip a monster with the same type or attribute, meaning a light or machine to himself, all you need to do is summon himself, and he would be you'd have a 2,000 beater, and your opponent would not be able to use the extra deck. Against some decks with a okay, mediocre to bad hand, that could just win you the duel by itself, and that's so insane that that's like even possible. Like combine that with like 1 or 2 hand traps, or maybe like a back row, and like that'll probably just win you the duel against most meta decks, which is actually so wild to think about. I very much so expect this card to be banned. I really hope they don't ban the Buster Blader or Dragon Buster, just because that's how, like, if they ban that, like Buster Bladers is like garbage. Like they'll be okay after their new card, but they'll just be straight up like unplayable after. They just won't do anything. So I hope they hit this card, because this is the card that's truly abusing it and will be getting abused in a multitude of decks. I mean, those are just 2 examples: the Orcust and the Dragon Buster card. I'm sure there are multiple other examples where this card could be like insane, like mid combo, and just like really just setting you up with just getting like archetypal stuff like out of the deck super easy. But I don't know. For now, like, that's all we really know about. Well, we'll definitely see more players get experimental with this in the future, but I think it really did deserve the #1 spot, because I think this one will immediately jump right into the forefront of the meta. Maybe Anaconda will be like right on its heels as far as like being used, but I still think this one will come out in the end as far as being like just abused in multitude of decks. So that's my top 5 list for the best, or well, theoretically best, but most impactful Link Vrains Pack 3 monsters on our metagame. Guys, let me know your thoughts down below. Let me know if you think I'm off on one of these, if I didn't give a card enough credit out of the Link Vrains Pack, if I gave a card too much credit. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts down below, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Subscribe if you have not, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.